Hello, everybody, and welcome to the FloTrack podcast presented by Wonderful Pistachios. I'm Liv Ekpone, joined with Ashley Tishins and Corey Mall. Y'all, this past week has just been full dose of high school track and field. U20s from Nike Outdoor Nationals, Adidas, New Balance, U20 championships were going off. But you guys, we're about to start packing our bags one last time. In the last 6 weeks, we've been in Eugene. We've just been in Eugene. So are you excited to go back?
Of course.
Yes.
Great weather. It's a little hot here in Austin.
Yeah,
A little hot. That is for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley and I were looking at the weather forecast for the next 10 days. So make sure you pack everything from rain jackets to shorts to long sleeves. Well, at least for me. You know, I don't do well with the colder weather, but yeah, I'm getting ready for it. But this episode, we're just going to be diving into all the things USA Olympic trials because that's what everyone's talking about right now. So we're going to dive into our top sprint and distance races, the deepest fields to look out for when it comes to the field events. We're going to see maybe there might be some upsets. We're calling them now, and also going to throw in our dark horse contenders to make Team USA. So let's get the ball rolling.
You want to chat a little bit about where we're going to be in Eugene?
Yes. How could I forget?
You can't forget that.
You guys, I mentioned this a couple podcasts ago, and I was like, I'm not paid to say this, but if you've not been to the pad, aka the paddock, you need to go. So we're actually going to be having our show inside the paddock throughout the course of the Olympic trials. This place is like our go-to place when we're in Eugene. They have amazing food. The fried Oreos I highly recommend. So we're super pumped about it.
Yeah.
I'm pumped.
It's a gem.
It is a gem.
It's a gem.
Yes. Right near Hideaway Bakery. So if you know where Hideaway Bakery is, it's right in that same
in the
area.
paddock, Steve Prefontaine worked there in high
Yes.
school, so plenty of, track lore to it, you know what I mean? So there's no better place I feel like to have a daily podcast basically during the Olympic trials than at the paddock.
Yeah. I'm just so pumped. It's going to be great. So come visit us there. We'll have more details coming out. So stay tuned for all of that. All right. Now, without further ado, see, I was jumping the gun. I got really excited because we're about to start talking about sprint races. So let's go ahead and we're about to call maybe the top sprint event that we're looking forward to. And Ashley, I'm going to kick it off to you.
Well, I feel like for me, there's no question we have to talk about the men's 100, right? Like that is the event that everyone's hyping up. It's the men's 100 of all things. It's the event that people are going to be having their eyes on. And I think there's really just a lot of conversation, too, about, like, who exactly is going to make this team, right? I feel like Noah Lyles, Christian Coleman, obviously are arguably two of the favorites here to make the team. But I think the question is who could sneak in, right, and, like, maybe get into that second or third spot as well. Will Fred Kerley be in his tip-top form, not up to his antics anymore like he was at the New York City Grand Prix? Could someone like Cravant Charleston, he's the defending U.S. champion, can he make the team? Could a high schooler make the team? Like, there's just so many storylines that I think makes this event just so intriguing this year. And then you can't forget about people like Kenny B, Brandon Hicklin, Kendall Williams, Ronnie Baker. Like, again, it's going to come down to who runs the rounds the best, who gets out of semifinals. Will there be any upsets? I think there could be plenty of drama in the men's 100. So that's the one that I'm going to have my eyes on.
I know, Ashley, you have this list.
Yes.
If you look at the top 12 in the world, it's just filled with Americans. So,
well, that's just the U.S. list.
Oh, that's just the US list.
That's not
Okay.
the world rankings.
Okay,
that's
gotcha.
just the U.S. list there. I just wanted to pull to see who could,
see.
looking at the rankings, who's in the best position now. I mean, if you look right now, Noah Lyles obviously is the leader for the U.S. Christian Miller, we all are very familiar with Christian Miller. There's been a lot of talk about him. Second in America right now in 2024. We just saw him run 9.95 at New Balance last weekend against high schoolers. So obviously when you think high schooler making a U.S. Olympic team, you get a little hesitant because of, the nature of the trials and the rounds and stuff like that. But he's gone under 10 seconds twice. So he's a legitimate contender, I think, in my eyes, if he can run the rounds well. And then you go down to Kendall Williams, Brandon Hicklin, Christian Coleman, Ronnie Baker. I mean, there's plenty of people there in that mix.
do we think Christian Miller is going to make this team? I'm not counting relay pools. Like, do we see him getting in the top 3? Predictions.
It's realistic to think he can compete for a spot on the team based on how he's run. He went into the weekend in Philadelphia running that national high school championship at New Balance, and he ran 9.95. So,
right.
And he was done after that.
Yeah.
He was like, I am ready to
done.
run the 100. That was enough. he didn't need to run the final. He didn't run the 200. He knew he was ready there. So I think it's reasonable. But I think last year at Outdoor, Crevant Charleston kind of proved to us that anything can happen in these situations.
Right.
And Carl Lewis said it best recently. It's really, don't worry about that start.
Yeah.
Worry about that finish. And I think everybody's got to be worried about the finish, even Noah Lyles, even Christian Coleman here. So, I mean, I think the wild card is a huge factor in these races. And, you know, while I think Noah is the favorite, Christian probably will get on the team too. There's going to be a third spot that could go to a number of guys.
Yeah, absolutely. As we just had the whole list of the top Americans, it's pretty close, and that's what you kind of expect in the 100. I can definitely see Coleman, Lyles making this field. I'm going to answer my own question and say yes, I can see Christian Miller. It depends on, we've been talking about this throughout the week. It depends on how he runs these rounds. Like, can he get through? I think he can make it through the first round. The semifinals, anybody will tell you, it's the stickiest one because it's like you got to put out some really fast performances to be able to get your way into that. And then the finals, you're just going, you know, monkey crazy in the finals. So I'm going to say yes. So Ashley, do you think Christian Miller can make it in the top 3?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've said this before, and I think what really solidified it for me was seeing him run 9.95 this weekend against high schoolers at New Balance at Franklin Field. I mean, he broke the Franklin Field record for the fastest 100 ever clocked at Franklin Field. And that, I mean, we all know the history of Franklin Field. So I think seeing him do that against high schoolers, I think that proves to me that, like, he's a legitimate sub-10 guy. And when you're a legitimate sub-10 guy, you should be able to contend against, you know, the best Americans on even the pro circuit, you know, at an event like the Olympic trials. Again, I think it's just a matter of, like, how, like you said, how he manages the rounds, how he kind of, you know, manages that pressure again. Like, he's, you know, he's competing against grown men, you know, and so that, you know, it does change some things. And obviously we've seen him do that when he ran that 9.93 earlier this season. But, you know, Olympic trials are a whole different game, but we all know he's been prepping for it. Like, he hasn't been racing a whole ton during his high school season because he's had his, you know, focus on that Olympic trials. So, you know, anything could happen, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I know you guys both said Christian's going to make your team. I have Fred Curley. You talked a little bit about his antics, but I think that, I mean, even though it was very, very recent, he has new spikes. He doesn't have to worry about the spike situation. And just remember last year, 991, he's running, you know, in the 100. I think we forget about Fred Curley a little bit because he didn't make that team, but I think Fred Curley is in my list for top 3 for the 100.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Like that pick. All right, let's throw it to you now, Corey, because we're still in that 100-meter space. So what are you expecting from the women's field?
Yeah, I'm going with the women's 100. Sha'Carri Richardson is the story and pretty much the only story in my book. She's one of the brightest stars right now in the world, and this is her chance to really claim the throne, I think, at the trials. She had a really great performance last year, and now there's all this sort of, I think, building, you know, wave of momentum for her. All she really needs to do is execute here, and she is the biggest star in the world going into the Olympics. So the big story for me, Sha'Carri in the 100, it's really, I can forget about times here. It's just win the day, win the race, get to the team, and you're set.
Yeah. Do we... yeah, I kind of agree. It's like Sha'Carri, and then who are the next 2 spots to fill in this gap? I can see Mackenzie Long potentially squeezing in there. TT Terry is a name that we all know. Tamara Clark. Like, there's so many other heavy hitters that could make it into this Olympic team.
Well, I'm surprised you said you only think Mackenzie Long's going to squeeze in here. I think she's a lock to make this team personally. I mean, you were just at NCAA. Did you not see what I saw on the track from Mackenzie Long? Like, she to me is, you have Sha'Carri, the next lock is Mackenzie Long for me. Like, I don't think anyone else is going to touch her personally. I think it's going to be those 2 up at the front. You know, we've seen, obviously she's the world leader still in that 200, and she's one of the fastest in the 100 so far in the world this year too. And I think she's just going to continue riding on some of that momentum from NCAAs. I think she's ready for that big stage personally. So I think she is definitely a lock for me. But then I think for me, it's that third spot that it gets a little bit open. I could see someone like Aaliyah Hobbs making the team. She's been really impressing me over the past year. I know she's been close to making teams in the past, but hasn't. So I think this could be her year. You also have Melissa Jefferson, Tamari Davis. Like, I think there's a lot of people that could get in there. I think I'll probably lean towards Aaliyah Hobbs personally, but you know, I think that it's going to be very competitive for that third spot personally.
Yeah, I have Aaliyah Hobbs as an athlete making it into that the 4x1 and also the open 100 as well. As you mentioned, I feel like she's just had so many close opportunities. Like she's been right there and then just misses it. So I feel like now this is Aaliyah Hobbs' time to shine and make this Olympic team. I know we just talked about Mackenzie Long. That throws me to my event, which is the women's 200 meters. And we have a list that we're going to put up on the screen in just a moment. And what I have here are the top 12 times in the world. It's pretty much all Americans if you look at it, but then you have Julian Alfred that's in there as well. You have Dina Asher-Smith, Brianna Liston, who's running for Jamaica, that takes that top 12 spot. So I want to share this because the 200 meters is pretty much dominated by the Americans this year. Gabby Thomas is someone to look out for. I know, as we mentioned, Mackenzie Long, she's the #1 name on that list. World leader with the 21.83, and she's the only person so far in 2024 to dip under 22 seconds. And then you have athletes. I know we have Sydney in that second spot, but I want to move it further down where we have Gabby Thomas at spot #3. She looked completely different. And I know we talked about this on the show, I think last week after the LA Grand Prix. She debuted her season with a 22.08. She recently went 22.42. I knew at one of the earlier meets, she was like, hey, I was in this training cycle, so I wasn't running as competitively or as fast as I wanted to. But what I can say is I think Gabby Thomas is someone that could be a contender for making this team in this 200 meters. I know she's going to be doubling in that 400 meters as well. So that I think is interesting. But then you also have athletes like Jamesia Ford, who's gone 22.08 and ties with Gabby Thomas for #3 in the world. And she ran that at the NCAA championship. So if you're Jamesia Ford, I know you're coming in with a lot of confidence saying, hey, I have a chance to make this team. And she's a freshman from South Carolina. And then, of course, Sha'Carri is going to be someone we cannot forget to look out for. She was the world bronze medalist last year, and she hasn't looked the best in that 200 meters. But I know we've talked about this after Prefontaine. When she dropped that 10.83, I think she's ready to do something big now. So I feel like the 200 meters, just like how you said Mackenzie Long and also Sha'Carri Richardson have it locked in that 100. I have Gabby Thomas, Mackenzie Long for that too. It's kind of open, I feel like, for that third spot.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the 200 is an interesting question here. And I think what will be important is going to be how you assert yourself qualifying for the final, because lane assignment does matter, I think, in the final, at least in the very, smallest respect mentality. Brittany Brown was talking about lane draw at the Diamond League recently, right? Yes. She doesn't want to be in lane 8 or lane 9 because you do have to kind of approach it a little differently. So it's how you set yourself up getting to that final that's going to really count and get you in the right headspace. So I agree that, you have your incumbents here that certainly will dictate sort of some of the momentum, Mackenzie Long, Gabby Thomas, but I really actually also think there is going to be some wild cards here that could enter in the mix. Just running that curve is really important. And if you put yourself in a good position after the curve to finish, I think we could be answering, some interesting questions after the race.
Gosh, it's Olympic trials. You just never know what you're going to get. We see it all the time. Ashley, any last minute thoughts on sprints before we move into distance?
Sure. I mean, if we're talking about that women's 200, I think going back to the point of Sha'Carri, what can she do in the 200? Yeah. Yep. I know I said it in the past, when she was running in those Diamond Leagues, I was like, man, she's not looking very good in that 200. But again, I think watching her run at Prefontaine made me realize, okay, she's fine. She's good. So we know she has it good in the 100. Does that translate to the 200? I think it does personally. So I think she's someone we need to watch to make this team as well too in the 200.
She was second last year at outdoor, 21.94. So she does turn it up a little bit, I think, in the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's shift gears. Let's talk about some distance events now. Corey, I'm going to toss it to you. This 10K.
Yeah, women's 10K, I think, is just a whole lot of what ifs, really. I mean, you can read about it a lot online. There's only one woman who's under the Olympic standard. That's Owani Kalati, who ran 30:33 at the 10. But then there's a whole list of women that are kind of sitting themselves on the world rankings list. And how, if they finish within the top 3, will they get a chance to represent Team USA? Ellie Hennis right now probably has one of the best shots because she's number 27 in the rankings. and she's coming off a 31:07 in March. So I know you talked a little bit us before the show about maybe she's coming off a little bit of an injury for Ellie Hannes, right?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I don't know all the full details, but yeah.
But 31:07, right, in March, she should be in line to perform here. And if we get 3 women under 30:40, it's not even, an issue. But, on the day, it's really about sort of how do you manage this race? Like, is it going to be tactical, right, to get in that first 3 places, or is it going to just go flat out fast? So those are the questions I think we have to ask. But Parker Valby, I think, is a big one. She ran 30:50. How do you guys see Parker Valby in the 10K? Or does she just focus on the 5K? Is that a situation where maybe you choose one over the other, or do you do both?
I think you got to do both, because I think so. The 10K will come first in the order of the Olympic trial schedule. I think if you're her, you got to try your best in the 10K to make that team, and especially since she's already proven she can run 30:50. That puts her among some of the best in the U.S. And I think she is one of the favorites to make this team in the 10K. So if you're her, I think you use that to your advantage and you go all out in that 10K.
Yeah, I agree. And we've seen it constantly over and over how she's been like holding herself back a little bit.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, just let loose. Let's see.
It's interesting.
It's
interesting to see her in a pro field.
Exactly. In college, she can run a certain way. I mean, she ran at the 10. Obviously, she likes to lead races and take the tempo out. But you got Kaladi in this race. You got Natasha Rogers, who's coming off a marathon in this race. Amanda Vestry. I think it'll be interesting to see how she responds to some of these women, or if she takes it out like she usually does.
Yeah. Ooh, this is going to be interesting now, because we haven't really seen, like you said, we saw her at the 10, but like, it's different when you compete against.
She wasn't at the 10. She was at a different race.
Right.
She was, oh gosh, what was it?
Peyton Jordan?
It was Peyton Jordan or Brian Clay. It was one of the Stanford, or not Stanford meets, but out there in California.
Out there in California.
Out there in California.
So far long ago now.
Here, I'll fact check this right now.
Yeah. It definitely wasn't the 10 though. But anyways, I think, honestly though, I think how I see it is like, I think Parker Valby has one way that she knows that she really likes to run, and that's to be like aggressive, and she's not afraid to make moves. So I expect nonetheless from her when she gets out there, probably at the Olympic trials, I think she'll be very aggressive.
Brian Clay.
Okay.
Brian Clay.
Couldn't remember.
Yeah. All right. Up on the screen now, we have the women's 1500. So Ashley, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think the women's 1500 is a really crowded space in order to make this team. I think Ellie St. Pierre is the one lock that I have in that event. I mean, she's been super impressive. She's super fit. She ran 3:56 for one of the fastest American marks all time at the Prefontaine Classic. But besides that, I think it's hard to say who's going to make this team. I mean, you have plenty of people like Nikki Hilt, Addie Wiley, Sinclair Johnson, Emily Mackay, Corey McGee, Heather McLean. Like, I think there's just plenty of people that can make this team. And especially in the 1500, it's really just going to come down to tactics, right? Like, is this race going to go out conservative? I would say on the women's side, it's more likely than not that it'll be a little, I think they'll probably try to push the pace a little bit. Yeah. And I think the question is, like, if St. Pierre decides to go out and push the pace, who's able to go out with her and stick with her and kind of hold on through the finish and finish in that top 3? I think it's really, it really could be a lot of different people that make this team. And I've had a hard time deciding who I think is going to make this team besides Ellie St. Pierre.
Yeah, I'm looking at Elise Craney, Addie Wiley, Sinclair Johnson, Nikki Holtz is in this mix, Danny Jones. Like, the list is so deep. It's like we're talking about. It's whoever is going to have the most heart for this race, towing the line in Eugene, that's going to make it.
This might be a hot take, but I actually have Addie Wiley winning the race.
See, I don't think that's
really winning.
Oh, winning. I don't know about winning. I think she'll make. I think she could definitely make the team. I don't think it's a hot take that she can make the team, because I've been really impressed.
Well, the hot take is she wins the 1500 meters.
That's a hot take. I don't know about that. Ellie St. Pierre, I think, is on a whole nother level right now. I mean, again, she went number 2 all time for Americans at Prefontaine.
Yeah.
I think she's going to continue that form into trials.
Well, I have St. Pierre at 2nd. I have Sinclair Johnson in 3rd. But, I mean, I just think, brush away fitness level and what you've done beforehand. Obviously it matters, right? Fitness matters, but like, we've seen some of the best athletes lose in big situations. Ingebrigtsen, everybody thinks he's going to win the 1500 meters over the last 2 years. He loses the last 2 years basically in these big races, right? And so I think in this situation, if you come up with the better move at the right time or the tactic, and you put pressure on people in the right situations, I think those things can happen. So I'm not dismissing St. Pierre. I think she's going to run well. She's going to qualify. But I think Addie Wiley, it's her time to really show
That's an interesting
you
take.
are.
Is it?
I don't know, because I think that it's interesting that you compare this to Jakob Ingebrigtsen, because this is a totally different person.
Really?
Yes.
This is a totally different person.
I
You already
think
know how I feel about Jakob.
it was stakes. It's more about like you get two equal talents together. One's maybe a little bit higher on the pecking order, but it's really about racing at that point, less about time.
Did you watch that 3K indoor world championship race where Ellie St. Pierre pulled away from one of the fastest ever at the distance? And you're telling me that's not a high stakes environment and called good race tactics? I think she has it down pat, personally.
All right, fair enough.
I'm just saying, just proving my point. We're not digging on.
Is she winning 10 out of 10 races? They ran 10 times. Is Ellie St. Pierre winning all 10 times?
No, that's just not realistic.
Exactly.
But yeah, but we're
talking about like a high stake environment.
I don't think
You took
anyone's
down a
taking her
world
down. We're not
record.
they're not running 10 times though.
So the only one that really matters, I think, is once you get to the Olympics, how you're running for a medal at that point. Here you're running to qualify. You have to make sure you're in the top 3 to get that bid to Paris. So while winning is great, your objective is to qualify first. So I think in some ways, these top runners can be measured. And maybe you don't run, optimally if you're in those distances. I mean, I think she will run fast. I think she will prove herself, but you don't necessarily have to run a world leading time or a record time here. You just have to qualify for the Olympics.
Okay, so this 1,500 meter field, as we know, is going to be really competitive, as we're seeing it from two different sides, which is great. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens. But let's move on to the women's 800 meter field, because I think this is just completely stacked. I've been talking about this over the last several months, that across the board, regardless of the USA trials, the 800 meter field itself, when you look at it and compare it to the world, in my opinion, it's so deep. You have athletes like Nia Akins, who is your defending national champion. You have a Thing Mo, who's the defending Olympic champion in this event and last year's bronze medalist. And we haven't seen her compete in literally a year. She scratched from Prefontaine earlier this season due to hamstring soreness. Then she dropped out a few days before the LA Grand Prix meet. So for me, it's just, there's a huge question mark on her status. I just don't know where she is. Just because we haven't seen anything from her in 365 days. But also in this mix, you're going to have athletes like Raven Rogers, who comes in with so much experience. She was the bronze medalist in the Tokyo Games. You have Addie Wiley, who's also declared in this event. But even just looking down, I think some athletes that competed during the NCAA championships could be a factor in this race. You have athletes like Juliette Whitaker, who is the indoor and the outdoor NCAA champion in this event. Roisin Willis, who's just coming off as the runner-up in this event. Michaela Rose has just been putting out some really strong performances, and Sophia Groriaron as well is in this mix. So for me, I'm looking at this list and I don't even know who to pick as like the solid heavy favorite, because all these athletes come in with so much experience, so much talent, and depending on how this race kind of plays out, could squeeze in for a top 3 finish.
Ashley, what do you think it's going to take to win?
I mean, I think realistically, it'll probably take a 156, 157. Like, I think everyone's pretty capable. The top people can run 157. If we're thinking like, Thing Mo, obviously she's gone 154, but like, as you mentioned, she hasn't ran this season. She's been dealing, as she said, with some hamstring soreness and injury there. But it's hard to it's hard to pick against the Thing Mo, right? Because she is, the GOAT when it comes to the, American women in that 800. And, even though we haven't seen her compete, I think you can't pick against her because of just what kind of athlete she is, and you can't doubt her there.
Yeah, so Nia won outdoors last year, 159.5. She won Prefontaine, 157.98 there to finish fourth. I think, realistically, there's only a few women that are going under 158. She's one of them. Thing's one of them. So if it does end up going fast, I think we kind of eliminate some of these girls and women from the mix. But in the 800, I think it really will come down to experience. And you mentioned a thing like, what are we going to see from her? I kind of have to trust that she's going to be ready. If just looking at what Bobby Kersey's been able to do with Sydney McLaughlin Levrone as an example. Thing obviously is kind of waiting for that moment to just be ready for trials. So I kind of have to trust that she's ready for this.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen a couple of athletes throughout social media like posting like, hey, we're so sorry, like cannot compete. And I feel like by seeing a thing Mo put declare by her name, I think she's ready to go. Again, I just don't know where she's at. Again, I'm trusting the process, trusting Bobby with this whole thing. But yeah, I think a thing Mo, Nia Akins is going to be in that mix. I think that top, like we mentioned,
who's a third woman you think, if there is a surprise, that will be
maybe not a surprise, but we have not mentioned this name here. I think Sage Herder-Klecker is going to make this team personally. I've been very impressed with how she's been running. She's been very consistent, consistently under that 2 flat mark, and she's been getting wins too. And so I think she's ready for this challenge, stepping up and making her first Olympic team.
I agree there. I think.
We agree.
Wow.
I think if there's another one
Really?
besides a thing and Nia, I think it's probably Sage.
Interesting. I think I have Juliet Whitaker as mine.
Well, that's a hot take. That's a hot take, I
It
think.
again, it just depends on how it's being run.
She
didn't
would
pick-
have to
here's the
run
thing, I didn't
a
pick
personal
her.
best.
Yeah,
too.
I didn't pick her for NCAAs. I went with Michaela, and then boom, Juliet just sneaks on in there. So I'm putting Juliet as my third place spot.
Okay.
There we go. All right, let's move on to the field events. I feel like across the board, this is also going to be a good one. So Ashley, what are we seeing in the high jump here?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the field events I'll be watching is that men's high jump, because I think it's going to be very competitive, because you have not only some veterans in that field, but you have plenty of newcomers from the NCAA level who could make this team. Leading the way, the favorite here is obviously Javon Harrison. But there, some of the other veterans in the field, Shelby McEwen, Vernon Turner, these are all guys that have been competing on this world stage for quite some time. But I don't think you can count out a bunch of the NCAA studs who are right there with those guys in the mix. You're going to have Tyus Wilson of Nebraska, Elijah Kosiba of Grand Valley State, D2 there. Caleb Snowden, Arkansas Pine Bluff. We just saw some of these guys compete at the NCAA championships in a really entertaining high jump competition. So I think this could be a year where we see maybe some of those NCAA guys sneak up ahead of some of the people like, Vernon Turner, even McEwen. It's possible.
I've talked about this in previous podcasts, but the story of Vernon Turner in 2016, he qualified for the trials. He no-heighted.
Yeah.
Right. So obviously he's had, 8 years of experience under his belt, so he's fine. But Scotty Vines is now a high schooler who's qualified for the high jump with nearly identical mark to what Turner had in high school. So I'm wondering if there's going to be any sort of mentorship there, or just a conversation between Werner and Scotty, like, hey, bro.
Hey, bro.
I was in your position 8 years ago. Here's how to deal with it.
Yeah, I can see that happening. And I love that about the track community. I feel like they're very supportive of each other, especially when it comes to the field events, too. So, Corey, women's shot put. This one should be good, too.
Yeah, I think Chase Jackson's probably clearly, the favorite here. And she's fun, by the way, too.
Yes.
The way she
love
presents
Chase.
herself and the way
Yes.
she performs. I like, seeing her, perform. And obviously she's a 2-time world champion going in here with a lot of momentum. But I think the second, third spots are really up for grabs. Jada Ross is the home state girl from Oregon, and she won the NCAA title. She's the only other woman in the U.S. right now with a mark over 20 meters. So she's right there with Chase and could get that Olympic qualification. But it's not set in stone, because your series has to be on the mark. You have to get your throw in the vector. And there's a lot of women that could potentially, make moves. Adelaide Akia, Maggie Ewan, Raven Sanders, Maya Lesnar, Gabby Morris. Gabby Morris was second at NCAAs to Jada Ross, but she ends up being, I think, like 6th or 7th seed here. So, her story at NCAAs proves that basically it's how you perform on the day. And I think outside of Jackson, I think there's a lot of shifting that could happen.
I wonder how many people are going to show up for Jada Ross this week.
Probably the same. They're all from Oregon.
They're all from
It's
Oregon.
not
That's
like
why
it's
I'm
a
like-
huge commute or anything.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So I'm wondering if she's just going to have a whole section just for the Jada Ross crew.
Yeah, it's just going to be like NCAAs. I think she said, on one of the days she was going to have, 17 people there or something like that. So I'd assume the whole crew is going to show up again to watch her compete at trials.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm looking forward to the heptathlon because it's going to feature Anna Hall. I know she has the top mark going into these championships. She's still coming back from a procedure, and she's been able to compete in different events throughout the course of this 2024 season. And I'm just, when you're coming back from a procedure like that, you're just trying to put your best foot forward. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Anna Hall does. But she's going to have some great competition with Michelle Atherley, who has scored 6,465 points. And you have Sherry Hawkins, who was actually third at last year's championship. She's going to be part of that mix too. But when you look down the list, your girl, Tamara Chapman, Ashley, who goes to A&M, just graduated. She was the NCAA champion, is going to be in this mix. And you have, I consider her a veteran, Talia Brooks, who was second last year. Annie Coots, who just missed the team for the World Championships, where she finished fourth. Erica Bogard, Shayna Burns, Ashton Mahler. Those are all other names that I think could really put out some really big marks. And I honestly don't think it's set in stone in any way, shape, or form. But I'm just looking forward to just seeing Anna Hall compete again in Hayward.
Yeah, I think I'm just curious to see, A, how Anna Hall's going to do, and then B, how everything falls, behind her, right? Like, I think, like you mentioned, there's plenty of people that, could be in that mix. I'll give a shout out to my girl, Tamara Chapman.
Yes.
I went to high school with her. We were on the 4x4 together a few times back in the day.
Imagine Ashley on a 4x4.
Can you imagine me on a 4x4? I was definitely the last person thrown in there, but hey, I think we were second at states. So, hey, we were pretty good. But now she's an NCAA champion. So, I think she's someone that could sneak up there too as well. I mean, she belongs up there with those ladies.
Yeah, I agree. So, all great things. So much to look forward to. Let's kind of shift gears. Let's talk about which event we could see that could potentially have the biggest upset. It wouldn't be a championship without upsets. You know what I mean? So, Corey, what do you think?
Upset!
What do you see?
I think the men's 3K steeple probably won't be an upset. I think whoever wins will kind of be, I don't know. When you look at the men's 3K steeple, is there anyone that really, really stands out? Kenneth Brooks is the defending 3K steeple champion here from formerly at BYU, and he looks good. He ran 8:18 at the Portland Track Festival. He's ready to go, but he was a surprise himself last year. So, I mean, the 3K steeple was one of those events where I think you tend to have guys that are really in form, and whoever's the best in form can make their mark on that day. I have a couple guys here that I'm watching out for. Parker Stokes among them at Georgetown. He'll have to be a little bit faster, I think, on the day to get it done, but he's not out of the mix here. There's also a couple guys from UA teams, UA Dark Sky and UA Mission Run. That's Matthew Wilkinson and Alec Baston. They went 2-3 at the LA Grand Prix in 8:16 and 8:19. I think they're in contention here. Joseph Baratuaa, I don't know, of Tim and Elite, also in here. The favorites might be Hillary Bohr and Anthony Rotich, who are 1-2 in the seeds. But I think a lot can happen here in the 3K steeplechase, and that in itself is a surprise.
I like that. I mean, shoot, you can see anything happen. Like we saw, Kenneth Brooks last year falling over the barrier and then coming back from last to first to win. If someone, kind of screws up a water jump, or you know what I mean? Like anything can happen. And again, I feel like there's no clear-cut favorite that's like, hey, this person is totally going to win this and make this team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ashley, what is it for you?
I think for me, sticking on the distance side, I have to go men's 5K, right? And I'll explain why. Like especially on the men's side, we all know how these distance events go.
Yes.
We just saw this at NCAAs on the men's side. I think right now we got a list of some, all the guys in the mix, I think, right now in the U.S. for that, to make that 5K team. It's probably going to go out super tactically, pretty conservative. And when it comes down to a final kick at the end, like that's where madness can happen, right? Like that's where you see sometimes the favorites not get a spot. We saw that at NCAAs with Parker Wolf, that final kick to win the title over Nico Young. And if you're looking at this list again, there's just so many people in this field that can make the team that if it comes down to something like that, it could be pure chaos, I think. You have Nico Young, Grant Fisher, Cooper Tier, Cole Hawker, even Yara Nagus is declared in the 5K. So I think, and again, some other guys in the mix, I think if it comes down to a final kick, Parker Wolf will be in this field. Drew Hunter, Abdi Noor, again, if it plays out like I think it will.
How do you think it's going to play out?
I think it's going to play out exactly like NCAA's.
Last two laps?
Yeah, last two laps, absolutely.
I don't agree at all.
You don't think so?
No.
Really?
I don't think these men can leave it to that. I think they go, I mean, even if they are measured, I think they're measured in the first maybe 4 laps, and then somebody starts to inject pace. Because you can't let it come down basically to a slow time.
The
You're
thing is, the
qualifying for the
guys do that
Olympics.
so often.
They do.
though.
They do.
Yeah.
But I remember last year, it might have been the 10K that there was a breakout of like the top 4 or 5 men, right?
I feel like 5K is just short enough though, where maybe it doesn't happen as maybe that happens, but it's probably maybe not as big of a breakout. But
You
who
would
knows?
be
Who knows?
disappointed in yourself if you knew you were
Yeah.
capable and you left it down to the final 2 laps.
Yeah.
I will say that at least.
Interesting. So you think not the last 2 laps?
I mean, maybe not the last 2 laps, but even over the final mile, that's
Yeah.
going to take a big kick, and anything
Yeah.
could happen
That's
over the
possible.
final mile.
That's possible,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
I feel like that's probably the more realistic option.
Man, distance racing. That's a whole nother ball game. All right. Upset for me. I think this might be a major hot take, but oh man. This this women's 400 field, and I feel like the men are kind of the same way. There just aren't any heavy favorites. I feel like it's anyone's game. I don't think I would fall out of my chair. I'm waiting for the mic drop here. I wouldn't fall out of my chair if like it was swept by collegiates.
Wow.
I would not.
I don't think that's a hot take. Though.
Really? I thought you would be like, Liv, you're out of your mind.
Okay, but look at how the collegiates have been. I mean, obviously the collegiates have had a longer season going, and they've been
Correct.
running a lot. It's, compared to some of these pros who have their eyes on Olympic trials and saving it for then. But like, who else has gone? There's been so many sub 50s at the collegiate level, and
Yeah.
consistently too. That like, I don't think that's like a hot take.
Who are your collegiate top 3 though? I'm curious.
I would put Kaylin Brown, Rosie Effiong, and I think Aaliyah Butler or Bella Whitaker would sneak.
Butler didn't even make the
Make the
NCAA
final.
final.
Honey,
Yeah.
it's a whole different day. This is
a whole new
it's a whole
level of pressure, though.
You're right. I'm not counting on Aaliyah Butler. I'm not counting her out. Aaliyah Butler. Or I had Bella Whitaker. And depending on what Jamesia Ford does, that's also questionable.
See, I went the other way with this. I actually went more so with experience. I know Kaylin Brown and Rosie have run fantastically, same with Leah Butler, but I actually picked Alexis Holmes
See, that's
to win the 400 because she's basically got that international experience. She hasn't made an Olympic team. She made a world team, right? And some of the
World team,
relays.
yeah.
But I mean, this is her time. Like, this is better time than anything for Alexis Holmes to stake her claim on the 400. So I'm going with her. I do think Kaylin Brown's good enough that she will qualify. But the third and final I'm going with is another experienced runner, and that's Talitha Diggs.
I'm a huge fan. We all know. Huge fan of Talitha Diggs. Yeah, like I said, it could fall. It all depends on the day too, and that's why I said I think it depends how the collegiate athletes are feeling, especially after, like you said, Ashley, just
Can I ask
a
a
long
question?
season.
Can I ask a question? How much do you think the Arkansas girls running lane by lane by lane helped them to that 49? Do you think there's any sort of like swing of, I think, performance based on the way they lined up in the final?
It could be, I'm sure there's a factor of like, you're racing with your teammates, the same people you practice with
Right.
every day, and you're all like, fighting with each other in the middle of the track right there. I'm sure there's a factor to that. But if we know anything about Arkansas, they prepare them for the big moments,
True.
right? And so
Yes.
I feel like despite that, they'll still, even though you're down to Kaylin Brown, Rosie Effiong, the only Americans from that, that Arkansas contingent, like I think they're still going to be prepared for the moment ahead, and probably will still find ways to feed off, the pros around them.
Yeah, exactly. And along with them having a long season, like you mentioned, I think Alexis Holmes could potentially sneak, like, to break this up. If I'm saying, hey, collegiates can sweep, I think Alexis Holmes is probably one of the front runners. Talitha Diggs. Also, Gabby Thomas has declared that she's running the 200, 400 double. I believe Gabby Thomas went 50 point this year, if I'm not mistaken.
She's gone either 50 point or 51, I think. But I think for Gabby, it's interesting. I think for her, she's really just trying to, I think, improve that when it comes to the Olympics, she can be put on that 4x4.
Yeah.
She said after the New York City Grand Prix, like, it would be, 4 medals. Like, who doesn't want 4 medals? And she's talking, 2, 4, and then 4x1, 4x4. But realistically, maybe she makes the 2 and then gets on the 4x1 and the 4x4, and you get 3 medals potentially. If she puts herself in a situation to make the relay pool and really proves herself there in that event.
So I just looked it up. She won 50.37 in April at the LSU Alumni Gold meet. So she's gone 50 point. That was, what, 2 months ago?
Sure, throw her in the mix.
Throw her in the mix. And then Lena Irby, Quinera Hayes, like, again, is just deep. But that's where I think an upset could happen is the women's 400 meters. All right, last topic. Our top dark horse contenders. Who do we have down to make this Olympic team that maybe no one really expected? Ashley.
I'll throw it to the men's 1500. We saw him with a huge kick in the 1500 win NCAAs. That's Joe Wascom. I think he's had so much experience at the NCAA level, knowing what it takes to win, even if you're maybe at the back of the pack and not at the front the whole time. And that can play a huge role when it comes to a race like the 1500 at an Olympic trials level. Washington, it's pretty obvious that, Andy Powell, what he's doing there, he's setting these guys up for success for those big moments, and he's teaching them how to race, right? And I think that's been pretty apparent, especially with Joe Wascom. And I think throwing him into this mix, again, like, I think he's one that if it comes down to a kick in the final 100, he could be there. He could even be someone that if he's at the front of the pack, I think he could hold on and still make a spot. So I think dark contender wise, he could be someone that could make the team.
Like that pick.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one other facet that helps college kids is racing. Their frequency, basically, I mean, we've seen it over and over again. The more you race at the college, obviously there's sort of like a diminishing return if you race too much, but I think they've raced smartly at Washington, and he has a lot under his belt. I think he's ready and fit and can do that.
Yeah. Corey, how about for you? Who's your dark horse?
Abby Steiner.
I like that pick a lot.
200 meters. Yeah, she's coming back from injury after outdoors last year, and I think she's pretty much back to full strength. 22.32 at the LA Grand Prix on May 18th. Even 2 years, we saw how good she was over 200 meters, and this is what I just kind of spoke on was frequency. She raced a lot that season. She ended up running 21.77 to win outdoors. She's capable of going sub 22. She just has to kind of put it together now at the trials, the biggest staked event there is, and I think she's capable, right? She's kind of in that age period in her life where she's experienced enough, where she's experienced failure, success. Now how do you put it all together? I think she could get to the team.
Okay, I like that pick too. The athlete I had down, Ashley was like, this is not a dark horse, but I have Chloe Timberg of Rutgers. She is your NCAA outdoor champion in the pole vault this year. She's cleared 4.71 meters. She won this event by 6.5 inches, which is absolutely ridiculous. Number 13 in the world, 4th in the U.S. The reason why I have her as like a dark horse is because when you think about the pole vault, you think about Katie Moon, Bridget Williams comes to mind, Sandy Morris. And, of course, going into NCAAs, like we were having multiple conversations about Hannah Mull. But just seeing what she did at the NCAA championships, I know that she has the confidence now, probably going into trials. Like, I've dominated the collegiate space because, Hannah Mull is someone that we've had on our radar for some time now. And Chloe was tied with her, and she was able to overcome all of that to grab that title. So that's why I have Chloe Timberg as someone that could soar into the top 3.
See, the reason I say that she's not a dark horse is she's literally ranked 4th in the field. I feel like you got to be a little bit lower in a field to be a dark horse, and I think she realistically could make this team. So,
can I ask who your top 3 are
in the pole vault?
Yeah, is Chloe the 3rd? If you're looking at her as a dark horse, is
yes,
she?
I have her 3rd. Okay. I would go Katie Moon, Sandy Morris 2nd, Chloe Timberg 3rd.
Okay. Yeah, Hannah made the team last year. I mean, I like Timberg. I think it'll be really close between those two.
Yeah.
Those two. Would Hannah be considered a underrated athlete at this point, or is...
No, I say...
Chloe's underrated because she's kind of coming... She won the NCAA title.
Yes. I don't think Hannah Mull, I don't consider her...
Because she won a U20 title at the world level.
Like I think Hannah Mull, like I just think about like she was so dominant in high school. She's a freshman,
won an indoor title.
Exactly. That's why I'm like, okay, cool. Hannah Mull.
Okay.
So I see Chloe potentially repeating what she did at the NCAA championships to solidify her spot on the Olympic team. But guys, this is it. Like we fly out this week. We're going to be holding it down at the paddock. I'm going to have a whole suitcase packed of different clothes. I'm ready. I'm ready. All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Please like, subscribe. Thank you, Wonderful Pistachios, for always fueling us with these healthy nuts. And we're looking forward to seeing you guys in Eugene. Take care.